This one rule unlocks every SAT punctuation question. Independent versus dependent clauses. If you don't know the difference, nothing else matters. Let's compare these two sentences. Try and guess which one of them is an independent clause, that is, could be a full sentence, and which one is a dependent clause. It could not be a full sentence. If you guess that number one is the dependent clause, you're wrong. But why? Well, let's consider this block tower. Let's say this is our independent clause, and maybe we add another block. So, okay, the sentence is a little bit longer, but it's still standing on its own, so we're all good. But what happens if we try to add this giant mouth? Ah, darn it, now it's dependent. It doesn't stand on its own. So the key to identifying dependent clauses is being able to spot these giant mouths. So what do they look like in the context of a sentence? It's pretty straightforward. They are what's known as subordinating conjunctions. Basically, any conjunction that's not one of the fanboys is going to be one of these subordinating conjunctions, and it is going to create a dependent clause. So how do you spot them? Well, I suppose you could try and memorize a list like this one, but that's not very pragmatic. There's just a ton of these, and I think you're better off just getting used to the sort of feeling that they invoke when they're put into a sentence. Basically, you want to ask yourself, does this word make me expect something more? If yes, it's probably one of them. For example, because I believe in you. Did you feel that? You're probably thinking, what? What because you believe in me? How about, whenever I think about the SAT? You might be asking, what happens whenever you think about the SAT, right? I'm leaving you hanging. So whenever you encounter one of these words that makes you feel like you are left hanging, that there's something missing at the end, you're dealing with a subordinating conjunction. Now, going back to our example real quick, I do want to point out that the SAT tends to use longer sentences to try and trick you. This is because with a longer dependent clause, you might get confused and kind of forget where you started. So I recommend simplifying these clauses and making them shorter. For example, we could convert this really long dependent clause into this simplified version that hangs on to all of the essential elements. Let's read that out loud real quick. Because this kitten spends its time in slumber. And you can feel that sense of wanting something more, right? Okay, finally, you need to know when it is okay to start a sentence with a dependent clause, because a dependent clause doesn't automatically mean we're doing something wrong. We just have to punctuate it correctly. Going back to our block tower with the mouth on top, remember that subordinating conjunction really screwed things up and our clause ended up falling over because while it was an independent clause before we added it, all of a sudden we turned it into a dependent clause by adding that one component, that one word, right? But if we follow up with another independent clause, now those two are going to be able to hold that subordinating conjunction, and then the sentence as a whole will be able to stand. So while this is not okay, since we have two dependent clauses, this is okay because we have a dependent clause followed by an independent clause. Just remember you need a comma after the dependent clause. All right, let's take the knowledge you learned and use it on a couple of actual SAT questions. Go ahead and try these two questions on your own first. Just pause the video and give them a go. But let's take a look. So, first one, we've got the word while right off the bat. So I know that this first part is going to be some sort of a dependent clause. While the committee agreed that the policy needed revision and spent several hours proposing amendments, so it looks like it's going to end at amendments. We can't have a period because, again, dependent. Can't have a semicolon because a semicolon acts like a period most of the time. And we do need some sort of punctuation. We need a comma, right? Remember, dependent followed by an independent clause. Choice B. On the right side here, the experiment failed to produce the expected results because the equipment had not been calibrated properly. All right. So we have another dependent subordinating conjunction, right? Because, however, it is coming after our independent clause. And you are actually allowed to have a dependent clause after an independent clause with no punctuation. And when you get to the end of that, you do have a full sentence. So I'm looking for full sentence options. Choice D wouldn't work because there's no punctuation. We have the word and here, and we could connect two sentences with and a comma, but there's no comma, so that's not going to work. Choice C, we have a comma splice, that is a comma acting like a period or a semicolon. Choice B, we have a semicolon, but then the word and is no longer making this independent, so choice B is out. And then choice A, I've got a period separating two independent clauses, or in this case, two full sentences. So choice A is my answer. All right, these ones are a little bit more challenging, so pause the video and try them on your own first, but here we go. So I do like to start with the sentence with the underlined portion, so we're just going to start with some. Some species, however, have been observed engaging in complex behaviors like da, 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 da. Okay, so we need to, I guess, first figure out if some species is an independent clause, because we have a semicolon here. Some species, no, that's not an independent clause, right? So D is out. Now, what's going on with these other options? We've got a semicolon here, so we could figure out if that's an independent clause. Some species, however, there's no verb, right? So B's not going to work either. So what we have here is what I like to call a comma sandwich. We have some non-essential information that's sort of interrupting the sentence, and that can be punctuated with two commas like in choice C. A way to test this is to get rid of, however, and see if the sentence still holds up. Some species have been observed engaging in complex behaviors like da, 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 da. See how it still sounds good? So that's going to be a little comma sandwich, something you'll learn about in great detail if you sign up for my full English bundle course. All right, on the right here, in one recent study, a group of scientists observed something unusual. So we have to ask ourselves, is that an independent clause? Well, we've got an introductory phrase, which is fine. It's got a comma. And then we have a group of scientists, that's our subject, observes something unusual. That's a full predicate with our verb phrase, right? So that is an independent clause. After that, do we have an independent clause? We have a dolphin using a sponge to protect its snout while foraging on the seafloor. So this is a little bit tricky because it might seem like we have a dolphin, which is subject, and then using a sponge to protect its snout while foraging on the seafloor. Verb phrase. So does that mean that we have an independent clause? It actually does not, because using, when it's placed right after a subject like this, is actually describing the subject. So this whole thing is one huge subject. In order to have a full sentence, we would need a helping verb for using, like a dolphin was using a sponge, or a dolphin is using a sponge. But because it just says a dolphin using a sponge, everything after using is just part of the description of a dolphin. So it's just one huge subject. We don't actually have a predicate, a verb phrase, right? So for that reason, we can't say we have two independent clauses. So choice B is going to be out because semicolon would indicate that. Choice C is even weirder because it's breaking up something and unusual. That definitely doesn't work. And we're left with a couple of colons here. Now, luckily, a colon can resolve a cliffhanger, something else that you'll learn about in my full English bundle course. So we just have to figure out, do we want a comma before unusual or not? No. Something unusual is a phrase that is being used together. There's no reason to separate it. So our answer here is going to be choice A. Now, if some of those rules were not familiar to you, you definitely need to check out my full English bundle. The 3 included courses are going to cover everything you need to know to get a perfect 800 in the English section of the SAT, and they include access to over 500 original practice questions that you can't find anywhere else. I will go ahead and leave you a link in the description along with a little discount.
Oh no!